The house stood alone, isolated, forgotten. Hollow Creek Road, they called it. It was a narrow dirt path that snaked through dense woods. The trees, gnarled and ancient, seemed to claw at the old Victorian mansion. Their branches, like skeletal fingers, tapped against the rotting wood siding. The house was shrouded in perpetual twilight. Even on the clearest day, an unnatural gloom clung to the rotting porch and the boarded-up windows. Locals whispered tales of a family met with a gruesome fate within those walls, their souls trapped for eternity. John, lost and disoriented, stumbled upon Hollow Creek Road. The night was closing in, and the shadows seemed to stretch endlessly, swallowing the path ahead. The last rays of sun bled from the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The once vibrant colors of the day faded into a somber twilight. His phone was dead, a lifeline cut off in the middle of nowhere. His car, out of gas, stood as a silent testament to his misfortune, a series of unfortunate events that left him stranded. In the distance, an old house, barely visible in the gathering darkness, seemed like his only refuge. The structure was decrepit, its silhouette haunting against the dimming sky. He approached cautiously, each step filled with trepidation. The front door creaked open, as if inviting him in, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. It was as if the house itself was beckoning him to enter. Musty air, heavy with the scent of decay, washed over him as he crossed the threshold. The interior was a time capsule of neglect, every corner filled with the weight of years gone by. He stepped inside, the floorboards groaning ominously beneath his weight. Each creak seemed to whisper secrets of the past, adding to the growing sense of unease. He told himself it was just an old house, settling into its foundation. Yet the oppressive silence and the shadows that danced on the walls made it hard to believe his own reassurances. But a shiver of unease ran down his spine. The air seemed to thicken, and the darkness felt almost tangible, wrapping around him like a cold embrace. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. The interior was dark, illuminated only by slivers of moonlight. The beams of light cut through the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows that danced on the walls. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. Dust-covered furniture hinted at a life lived and abruptly ended. Each piece told a story of its own, now forgotten and left to decay. Cobwebs draped over the furniture like ghostly veils, adding to the sense of abandonment and neglect. John found a room relatively undisturbed and decided to stay put until morning. The room, though dusty, seemed to have been spared the worst of the decay. He hoped it would offer some semblance of safety for the night. As he sat on the edge of a musty bed, he heard it. A soft whisper like silk on skin. The sound was so faint it was almost as if it was a figment of his imagination, yet it sent a chill down his spine. It seemed to come from the shadows in the corner of the room. The darkness there seemed thicker, more oppressive, as if it was hiding something. John strained his eyes, trying to pierce the gloom, but saw nothing. He dismissed it as the wind, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. The feeling of unease was palpable, and he couldn't shake the sensation that he was not alone. The feeling of being watched intensified. Every creak, every rustle seemed amplified in the silence. John's heart pounded in his chest as he looked around nervously, his eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, searching for the source of his fear. Section 4. The Haunting Escalates. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves against the windows sent his heart racing. Then it happened again. This time the whisper was clearer. A name. Emily, it hissed. He saw it then in the dim moonlight. A child's doll lying discarded in the corner. Its porcelain face seemed to contort in a malevolent grin. Panic welled up inside him. He was no longer alone. The house was alive. Section 5. Facing the Unknown. The shadows seemed to writhe and pulse as if they were alive, breathing with a sinister intent. The darkness was not just an absence of light, but a presence, a living entity that seemed to watch him with unseen eyes. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen menace. It was as if the very atmosphere was conspiring against him, pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The fog swirled around him, obscuring his vision and heightening his sense of dread. He heard Emily's name repeated over and over, growing louder, more insistent. The whispers seemed to come from all directions, echoing off the walls and filling his mind with a relentless, haunting chant. It was as if the house itself was calling out to him, demanding his attention. He had to get out. Panic surged through him, a primal instinct to escape the unseen horrors that surrounded him. His heart raced and his breath came in short, ragged gasps. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to run, to find a way out of this nightmare. He ran towards the front door, but it slammed shut before him. The sound echoed through the house, a final resounding note of his entrapment. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead as he realized the gravity of his situation. He rattled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. He was trapped. The door seemed to mock his efforts, remaining stubbornly closed despite his desperate attempts to open it. He could feel the walls closing in, the darkness growing thicker around him. He spun around, his heart pounding against his ribs. The fear was almost tangible, a living thing that clawed at his insides. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and frantic, echoing in the oppressive silence. A shadowy figure flickered at the end of the hallway, dissolving into the darkness before he could get a clear view. It was a fleeting glimpse, but enough to send a chill down his spine. The figure seemed to be a part of the shadows, an embodiment of the fear that gripped him. He knew he had to find a way out, before the darkness consumed him completely. Section 6, Revelation. John backed away, terror seizing him. He stumbled, falling onto the dusty floor. As his hand hit the ground, he felt something cold and hard. A small metal frame. He picked it up. It was a picture of a young girl, her eyes wide and innocent. "Emily," he whispered, his voice trembling. The air grew still. The whispers ceased. John stared at the picture. He noticed something behind Emily in the photograph. A figure, barely discernible, shrouded in shadow. It was him. He was the ghost.